Turn it up.
What's up, man? Good morning. How you doing?
Oh, good afternoon. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. I'm doing okay, dude. I'm a little foggy brain. I'm kind of fighting I think it's a cold, but I took the heck out of some emergency.
Please don't kiss me like you normally do.
So no kissing, no hand holding during our session.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And to all the rest of you, welcome. Hello. Happy Thursday, or whenever you were listening to this. If you're new to the show, so welcome to the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast.
That's right.
If you're new to the show and you're like, what is this about? A buddy told me I had to listen to it, texted me a link.
And by the way, tell us who that is.
Yeah. So Head, Heart, and Boots is the founders podcast for Floodlight Consulting Group. And more recently, now another family, part of our family of companies, Floodlight Sales Partners.
That's right.
So Floodlight Consulting Group, we're a restoration industry consulting company. And so restoration and construction, that's our world. All of our consultants are past owners, which makes us somewhat unique in the consulting and coaching space. And then Floodlight Sales Partners is fractional sales leadership. So if you've been struggling to hire just the right leader for your sales team to really help you grow a strong commercial sales engine in your business, it's tough. It's hard to find the right person.
Yeah.
You know, they've got to be equal parts mentor, manager, coach, developer, and they need to have had a successful career selling personally. And that's a tough combo to find. But we've found them, and we have those people on our team. And for a reasonable monthly fee, you can have a turnkey solution to begin or continue expanding out your commercial sales team. So those are kind of the two things we do. We help people grow and scale their companies.
Yeah.
And we've got two solutions to help them do that. Just go to floodlightgrp.com, yada, yada. And
right.
You can find us out there. Today we got we have a surprisingly good show. I told them in the recording I was really looking forward to this. The truth is I was tentatively excited to have a great conversation about financial things and nerding out.
Yeah.
Because sometimes with financial people, they maybe don't have the best on-screen presence.
It's a little tough sometimes.
And this was actually very awesome. And so buckle in. Finances is something all of us as entrepreneurs have to have a handle on. And the more we understand it, the better partners we have around us, inevitably more money we're going to make.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell us, like, who do we have on the show?
So we're going to hang out with Jim Emerich and Melissa Zinni. They're both from Backbone CFO. They're a fractional CFO partner of ours. We have two that we work very closely with, and we appreciate and respect both of them to death. You know, what's interesting about the conversation is that we really just tried to get into some of the headspace that we wrestle with as business owners and decision makers, where we pause when we should be taking action. We ignore certain red flags or certain things about our operation, and they can cause us more pain and angst than we need to allow them to. And you and I were talking in prep for this show, like, hey, I think all of us right now are experiencing some level of anxiety or stress around cash flow and revenue. And I think that we tend to try to solve these problems sometimes with old actions that didn't create the right outcome. And I think what we tried to do today in the conversation was identify some of those things that keep us stuck, and hopefully highlight some ways that we can change our behavior or modify our thought process so that we can get some different outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it boils down to that. And at the end, it's really funny because, Chris, you sling a question that ended up being super fun. And I actually walked away with an answer of a burning question we've had more recently that I will be partnering with Wayne to put into practice. So real fun conversation, good show. These two people know exactly what they're talking about. They're certainly apex predators.
We even get into it. Can you tell we're trying to convince you to listen to this financial show? Trust us, it's good. No, I mean, we even get into some cost saving, opportunities within insurance and. Anyway, we think you'll really like these guys, and if you decide to reach out to Backbone afterwards, be sure to tell them you heard about it on the Head, Heart, and Boots, so they'll send us a fruit basket or something.
That's right, because we love fruit baskets. All right, guys.
Enjoy the show.
Let's go. Jim, Melissa, thanks so much for hanging out with us, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
What's happening? This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think when people look at the title and go, oh, financial conversations, let's light our hair on fire. But there's a reality right
Buckle
now, right, where holy cow, like I think that many of
Yep.
us in our businesses are having opportunities to face some stressors financially, I think is probably a nice way to say it. We've heard many things right now in the industry in terms of claim volume and yada yada. Long story short, like our team is really keyed in right now. Like as consultants, what can we be doing to best partner with our clients and really think about maturing our financial management, our financial competency, to be proactive in solving some of the problems, right, that we're all currently facing. Hence why we wanted to get you two powerhouses on the show.
Yeah.
And really hear firsthand from folks that are diving in and rolling up their sleeves with people, different ways that we can be thinking about and poising ourselves in terms of financial competency to be better business leaders, right?
Yeah. I think the timing is really good for this. RIA just launched their cost of doing business survey
That's right. Yeah.
again this year, which is it's timely. And I think they've been doing this. This is what, year 3, maybe?
I think, yep.
Year 3. So I think with that, with the way the RIA is kind of stepping up, trying to do their data collection and provide people insight into the industry of like what benchmarks are and best practices, it's tuning more and more restorers into like what are these metrics and what should my business look like and what are the numbers I should be chasing. And so I think it's just creating more awareness around financial competency.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that maybe helped frame the conversation a bit is it's been a little bit shocking for Brandon and I at times since we started Floodlight to encounter companies in some cases that are doing 10, 15, 20 plus $1 million in revenue that have very little financial controls in place. And they're really just winning based on grit and determination and good values and stuff like that.
For sure.
But there's lots and lots of stored energy and inside their business because they just haven't drilled in on establishing great financial controls and learning how to project and forecast and look out in front of the business financially. And so I've been excited about this topic because I think there's very little conversation happening around high-level financial thinking in our industry right now. So it's great to have you guys on the show.
Yeah, for sure.
We're excited, man. I think a lot of things that you just touched on right there in that bit of a summary, they kind of touch the heart of exactly why we started Backbone CFO. And the good news is, if you're listening today and you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, leader, you're not alone in that. I think a lot of times, Chris, you just mentioned like grit, values, vision gets you pretty far. And honestly, it should. Those things are fundamental to being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I would tell anyone listening to this, you two included, myself as an entrepreneur, and Melissa, like those things have to lead, because you can have all the financial controls in the world, but if you don't have vision, values, like some of those core components to gaining traction in your business, like all the financial metrics and controls in the world won't save you. But I think you're speaking specifically to people that have gotten to a certain place, and scale now is becoming very dependent on building things that you haven't established yet. Like what got you here kind of won't get you there conversation. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about introducing at this point is you've gotten to a certain place. There's certain external factors now that are maybe causing you to think twice about what's going to be the next thing. And financial control could be some of the things that you need, maybe you're missing right now, that's causing you to leave some stuff on the table.
Yeah, that's good. You guys, Melissa, I think I want to start with you, but from your guys' perspective, what are you seeing as you're working with clients really of all kind of size and industry, but you guys do specifically work with some partners in our industry. What are you seeing as some of the biggest kind of gaps that people come into a relationship with their financials in regard to like how they're thinking about the P&L, how they're thinking about cash flow? Just what are you guys seeing as kind of those big top 3 hits?
I think that what I see with restoration clients specifically and construction clients, the owners and operators are so in tune to the jobs. They know how many they have, they know where it is, but their P&L is not really reflective of what they have, I'll say, on the street or in value. right? So they're not recognizing all the income that they should be, and they're potentially not properly allocating all of the expenses that they should. So I'm going to talk about job costing and a WIP report, a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
Really knowing that allows folks to get a good handle on their profitability. When you do that and you take the time to learn that schedule, and we love to help companies do that, you now are going to get insight on your progress. You're going to get insight on future cash flow. And let's be honest, you're going to see real quick what jobs are maybe not winning for you. And you're going to have a job that doesn't win. It's gonna happen. Yeah. So we're doing that with a lot of our folks now. We're helping them see those things, and it's eye-opening, and it's allowing us to now have conversations about the operation. Okay, now let's spend a little bit of time at estimating. Let's spend a little bit of time here learning. And so just getting our hands around the finances in this stage of a project is huge right about now.
That's huge. Got it. Okay. Jim, do you any additional layer to that, or anything else that you're seeing as the big stopgap?
Yeah, I mean, Melissa hit it dead on. I mean, I think you get to a certain scale and size, and you have to start looking at things through a different lens. Those lenses are on one hand going to take you more granular, to Melissa's point: job costing, work in progress, percentage complete, how's my job, estimate versus actuals. Like, that's all the nuts and the bolts. And then at the other hand, you have got to have the ability to pull back. And I think the business owners that we see that do well in scaling or trying to scale their business have to learn how to stop, and then also say, well, what does the next year look like? What does the next 18 months look like? How does the decision I'm about to make on hiring or investing in my capital into equipment or what have you, how does that allocation decision impact 12 months from now? Yeah. And what has to be true for me to meet my overall business goals between now and then as a result of that decision? And we would call that like a financial projection, which is a bit more of a high level tool. So I think both. Melissa's dead right. Like, that job costing, that work in progress, that kind of, I would say, day-to-day decision making as it relates to your business.
Yeah.
And then the ability to pull back, the ability to see things at the most highest strategic level to say, am I getting where I want to go in my business? Am I getting out of my business what I really want from it?
That's a huge, I think, a huge point. And it's funny because when we transitioned from restorers to consultants, like everything about how we deliver a service and then get paid for that service just looks very different. And one of the things that it kind of blew me away, it was a little embarrassing, honestly, is how often I was running and leading restoration companies from this more in the moment perspective. And it's so much so that when we started looking at, let's say, a client rolling off of our book, right, for whatever reason that might be, they come to the end of their agreement, whatever, like, you just think of it in that moment, just like we do sometimes in restoration, that one job, that 1 month's worth of income. And the reality of it is when we start thinking about it on the year, if I lose a client in January, I've lost a year's worth of revenue from that client, not a single month's worth of MRR. And so It forced us to get more aggressive about what happens with a decision I make today in regard to how it was going to affect me economically later. And for whatever reason, when I was in the trenches in restoration, it wasn't as easy for me to like pull back and really worry about that. Like, it was so much about what's right in front of me. And so I can just really resonate with what you guys are saying, the value of both, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, one of the big overarching trends in our industry right now over the last really 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years has been consolidation. Right, where you've got more and more restorers are being acquired by larger entities, and so people are adding additional locations, or people are doing greenfield, expansion, opening up satellite offices, and so there are more and more restoration companies growing that way than ever before. What are some of the challenges as people? I mean, Brandon and I are fully aware. We've talked about it many times. Some of the operational challenges of expanding to additional locations. But what do you see financially that people tend to begin struggling with that maybe they didn't anticipate or plan for from a financial standpoint as they start to have all these remote other sites that people are doing business at?
Melissa, you want to go first?
Sure. I think so. This goes back to something Jim said early on, which is what you did then will not build what you're going to do next. You said it differently, but we need to build a foundation and you need to build a scalable process. And so, what folks have when that acquisition or a new venture is not always the most successful, it's because it feels like, oh, I'm just going to buy them and it's going to work. You need to work on integrating them and actually having repeatable, scalable process that does not need the business owner to do it. Right. So when you're growing, it's no different than the mindset of what you need to build if you're going to sell. So if you're going to sell, the number one thing that anybody who is going to buy you wants is to make sure that that business is going to run without the owner, right? We love you, Brandon. You're great, but, right, I want to make sure this whole thing runs without you.
Yeah.
So if you're going to grow, you need to have something that is repeatable, that can grow without a single person. It's the process that can grow. And so really helping anyone, right, restoration or any business, identify all those pillars that are going to stand up another location is really important. Making sure, and sometimes just taking it slow is really the only way you can do it, right? Running too fast doesn't always pay off. And so we have seen that be the most successful way that folks have been able to do that. So even though you might have the cash, make sure you have the process.
I love that.
Yeah. Anything else you would add, Jim? Yeah, I think I'm curious too. Just like, what are the financial practices maybe that ought to change, or be that they should augment their process with when they start doing business in other markets or having additional operation centers?
Well, just you should air quote whatever Melissa just said there at the end. That was really good. But what I'll say too from Chris, I'm going to answer your question. And I just want to add to the last question, which is like just on the expansion of organic growth versus inorganic growth. I kind of think is what you were saying there. I'm like very bullish on that strategy as a path to growth. One of the hangups I see in that process that happens all the time is what somebody is willing to pay for that expansion. And I think one of the things that has to be considered as an entrepreneur, if you're listening to this, is, I have said opportunity in front of me, and you always have the alternative of seeking that exact same growth on your own, right? So I think comparing those two costs, and there's a delayed cost of revenue and profit on one hand, right? If you do it organically versus if you go to acquire an established location or established enterprise somewhere else, what are you willing to pay for that? And what is the opportunity cost of not doing it? And these are things that I think, going back to long-term planning, being able to pull out and make some assumptions and lay that out mathematically, so that when you're going into it, Melissa made a great point there. You could have the cash and capital that you think you need, but I think one thing we see as entrepreneurs we work with, and I see this own issue in myself, is a lot of times we get ahead of our skis, and we want to make decisions based in like kind of spur of the moment, maybe a little bit emotional, maybe a little bit optimistic. And I think you need optimism as a business owner. Like it's almost a requirement. That being said, I think pausing, getting yourself surrounded with the right people, probably your leadership team for sure, and looking at all the variables, understanding what the enterprise value of that potential acquisition actually is very important, because I think you have to weigh that against what would be the alternative cost and time to build that thing on my own. Especially, we're under the assumption now that you've already have a center point of establishment, right? You know how to do this business. You know how to do this operation. That's under the assumption already. So if that's the case, you can make a pretty good decision based on what it would cost to replicate your know-how, your operations, your sales, your those kinds of things. And I think that should be taken. What was your other question? Sorry, Chris.
Well, that's smart. I was just thinking in terms of financial practices, because some people listening to this are getting ready to open another location, and XYZ, whether that's a greenfield, they're going to build it from the ground up, or they're going to acquire it. And it seems like in our view, it's important there's some behavior shifts in terms of maybe how we're, here as an example, when people start expanding into other locations, there's an opportunity to centralize services. right, under maybe the mothership, right, the home office, to handle the accounting, the AR, recruiting at a central location and provide those services to the satellites, but then accounting for that cost, right, can get a little bit, it can become a bit of a soup, right? How the cost is flowing across those things. So just curious if you have any suggestions from a financial standpoint that people should have in mind or be talking to their financial person on the team about.
I would say number one is, do you know your costs at the first location? Do you really know the
actually
cost?
know what your costs are to begin with? Yeah.
Do you know your overhead costs? Do you know your SG&A?
Yeah.
Do you know your cost of doing business on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And do you know your gross profit margin? Do you know what success looks like at location 1 before you go to location 2, 3, 4, 5? And I think, we have some folks we work with in your industry right now, and I think that assumption is not always true. Yes. Irregardless of size, irregardless of cash in the bank, irregardless of profitability or years in business.
That's right.
So I would say number one is, do you know your cost of doing business at location 1 before you expand and take on another complexity and dynamic environment of now needing to know cost of doing business at location 2? So that's step one. In terms of some of your points, without a doubt, from an acquisition strategy perspective, the consolidation can yield economies of scale in, I'll call it, indirect cost areas or overhead, SG&A, things like that, which should be considered as an advantage in the strategic way of scaling. Yeah. So 100% that can be the case. And Melissa, I'll let you speak to some of the specifics, but one thing going into my mind, and I was so prior to starting Backbone CFO, I was worked for a company that had 4 acquisitions in almost 6 years, starting from one location. And one challenge that constantly would bite us in the ass repeatedly was cash flow, right? Because the mothership, so to speak, was always funding being the bank of the other locations until those locations got up and running. So in other words, most businesses aren't set up to be a financing institute. So just remember that. And because of that, that doesn't mean you can't capitalize new ventures and those kinds of things, but have a financing plan in place, because that cash can get tied up. I always say cash has this incredible ability to grow wings and fly away, and it never comes back. Yeah. And just account for that. Assume that from the beginning. Have a financing plan in place to capitalize your new ventures. But I'll let Melissa speak to some of the specifics.
Yeah, specifically as we've seen folks grow out into new locations, I would challenge every entrepreneur, every owner who's going to do it, be vulnerable and be willing to know that the plan that you put out might not be what's going to work for that location. And just because you have 5 people in the office in location A and you're prepared to finance and fund for 5 people in location B, it may not be. And it's okay to fail, but fail fast. So be willing to be vulnerable to say, I'm going to set benchmarks for myself on a financial way that says I'm going to allow myself this much time to get a return on my capital, or before I pull some other levers, right? Because we have seen a couple of business owners who have jumped in with both feet, which is what you want to do. You want to start there. You don't want to put a toe in. You got to go all in, but you got to be ready to start to pull back if the indicators are there. Don't look at everything with the rosy glasses. So we have seen some folks, and so setting up good financial metrics to say, I need this many deals. I want to have this much in revenue, this much in backlog, and I'm just throwing out a couple KPIs we all talk about, but what does success look like, and know it before you agree to jump in.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing to that? Just speaking, thinking of real life, industry specific examples. Who's accountable for those things that Melissa just mentioned at location number 2, 3, 4, and 5? Yeah. Is it going to be the same people that are not only financing from location 1 and the headquarters of the mothership, but they're also doing all the things? They're responsible for all the things at location 1. Who's going to be responsible for those and accountable for those outputs at these new locations? And I think we can easily talk about financial bandwidth, but we all know there's an operational capacity limitation. to teams and to leaders. And when we go into new locations, is it clearly identified who's responsible for what? And is there clear accountability to make sure that the drivers that are going to push success forward, things like Melissa just mentioned some really good ones, sales backlog, sales pipeline, then there's fulfillment execution, collections, are all these things established? And some of that can be held back at the centralized location, like collections is a good example. But some of it will need boots on ground to move things forward, like sales pipeline and backlog. And who's responsible for that? Is that clearly defined, and is the accountability in place for that to be a success before it starts?
That's a huge point. And I just want to kind of like double click on that for everybody. Like, make sure you pay attention to that, because I think one of the things that both of you mentioned at the beginning of that line of questioning was just opportunity cost. And I think that's where we get high centered is we don't really know how to consider the opportunity cost. And I think what we lose sight of is the longer it takes us to establish a consistent level of execution at that location, even if before we touched it, they were fine, because inevitably when we try to pull them into our culture, our system, new leaders, new relationships, like humans are finicky, and we make things 10 times harder than they need to be, most likely, right? Like, I don't think we're accurately paying attention to those costs, and they can be difficult to even pencil. And so therefore we tend to ignore it. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I think what you guys have said is awesome. And I think that last point is big, is if you do not have a leader that you can trust and depend on to have some sense of accountability and ownership over that location's performance, the opportunity cost could be really, really high, and it's hard to articulate,
Huge.
Another thing, I just like kind of like two places I want to go based on what you guys said. I want to get this question kind of milling around in your head. So, Melissa, you had mentioned like people not taking action, right? Like a delayed action taking and what that means. And I want to come back to that with why do we struggle to take action, even when our partners and our data is telling us that we need to do something differently than we're currently doing. So just hold on to that, because I want to get into that with you guys. But I just wanted to share a quick example in regard to this game that we can get caught up in, especially in the feeding frenzy that we see in the industry about top line. And, our friend Rocky over at One Tom is just a huge proponent of, he doesn't really even care about top line at the end of the day. It's all about profit margin, right? Because that's the stuff we keep. And I think, one of the things I can wrestle with personally is I work with a bunch of restorers, and a lot of them are just absolutely killers. And they're growing these big, robust businesses, and I look at them pulling 30, 40, $50 million a year in top line. And here I am with, our numbers with our little company. And it's easy for me to get swept up in the ego trip of, we need to buy, we need to go get this player, we need to accumulate these assets and pull it under our leadership and have this in top line revenue. And we literally just went through a scenario where we were considering things like this. And when we really stopped to look at the cash flow, when you're in debt up to whatever number, right, because you had to leverage yourself to make this purchase, by the time you get done settling that debt and paying not only the principal, but the interest payments on that, it's amazing how little cash you actually are able to keep at the end of that transaction. And so my encouragement to people is like, look, just because your neighbor's doing 30 million, that's cool. Find out what they're doing for profit, and you might be able to do that with a $10 million business. So don't get swept up in top line and the conviction that somehow a bigger, more complicated company is a better company. Because sometimes, man, those small guys at 5 million and they're able to produce at 30% net operating income, like, they're doing all right, and they're companies like mine. You know what I mean?
Which we should rather have.
Yeah. Okay, that question, guys, it's burning on me for sure. Like, what is it that you guys hear people telling you when you are like, hey, the mirror's real clear here, we need to do something different, and they're not taking action? What causes that?
For me, what I've heard is usually when people aren't taking action, it is because there has been a negative outcome. Most times, if you have people take action because things are positive and the action's going to have them grow, most people jump, right? But human nature is, I don't want to fail. I don't want to shrink a little bit, regroup, and then blossom. And it's, it's our job, and what I do in many calls is, okay, I hear you. This is the writing on the wall. You are not getting out of this what you're putting in. But, okay. So can we agree that we'll revisit this in 30 days or 45 days? By the way, after 45, no, you got to pick a number between 0 and 45. We're not visiting this in 45 months, right? So I definitely push a little, guys, let's talk about it. Come on, why do you not want to do this? And most of the time, folks it's just, they don't want to fail. And the answer is, it's okay. I don't want to either. I'm a competitive person just as much as probably everybody listening. Yeah. But let's now take all those resources and go get a win, because that's what we're going to do. We're not going to sit back and say that one didn't work. Oh well, it's that one didn't work. Now let's go get another one, because that's the motivator I have found with our clients and entrepreneurs is, let's go get another one, and we can, and let's approach it differently, because not everything's going to be a win. So that is usually what I have seen with people not wanting to really make that hard decision, is because it's a fear of failure. But if you can step outside yourself for a minute, use the counsel that's being given to you, and find another way to deploy those resources for the positive, you will win.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. Jim, you got anything to add to that from your seat?
Man, so you asked that question, I immediately filter it through like a leadership answer. I hate to do that, because I'm sure you want a finance answer, but man, like I heard this quote years ago, and it's just stuck with me as a leader, and it's just going to sound counterintuitive to a CFO. I know it is, but just trust me. I've seen the best leaders do this, and that is, great leaders do not make great decisions. Great leaders make their decisions great. And I think the essence of that quote is conviction, to say, I've made this decision to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, to be profitable, to your point. I'm going to do what it takes to make that decision work. In spite of fear, in spite of failure, in spite of the hard times, in spite of the tough decisions, that's what has to be done. And insert whatever you want into difficulty, fear, all the things that economy, right? The things you can't control, the things you can control. Yeah. I think to Melissa's point, I think, it's really just about making decisions and committing to action. And again, that sounds fluffy, and it could sound fluffy, but I think it really is a leadership thing, to be, as a business owner and entrepreneur, to just be committed to making your decisions work, finding counsel that can help you get there. And I think committing to actions really, it's being vigilant in that sense to make sure that you are committed to action.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can relate to that.
I like that phrase.
Yeah. It's funny because Chris and I and the gang internally here at FL, we use the statement a lot, like, let's play to win, not to be right. And, and that's like our own gut check of sometimes, like, we just want to be right, and you start protecting the wrong thing, and you're no longer focused on the outcome, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so we just try to keep each other in check by the whole, okay, we playing to win here, or we playing to be right? And it tends to keep us out of too much trouble, but we're just as susceptible to this challenge as anybody else. My ego flares up. I hate making a decision that feels like, here it is for me. Like, I promote a concept, a vision, an idea of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And it does not feel good as a leader to turn around and say, I was wrong and that didn't work. And because of that, I've got to make some decisions that aren't your fault. Like, this is all on me. But it doesn't change the fact that I am forced to make these decisions, because I still have to fight for the whole team and tomorrow, not just today. And so, but it's hard. Like, that hurts my ego, hurts my pride. It makes me feel like I lied to people and let them down. And those are all reasons for me that makes it difficult sometimes for me to take the action that I know is staring me in the face.
Yeah.
And it feels like every time's just as hard as the first one. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that. But.
I mean, what you're saying there, like, brings two words to my mind, and that is being humble and vulnerable. So like, the antithesis of leadership is really pride, because being a great leader doesn't mean that you're right all the time. It doesn't mean that you're the most successful, but it does require that you're vulnerable, and when you're wrong, you admit it, right? And you're humble. And I'll to make this more like kind of bring it back even to like some of the finance stuff in terms of scaling. And we talked about a lot of the inputs required to make a decisions like forecasting and projections, know your costs, job profitability, gross profitability, all those things, right? If you don't understand those things as a business owner, or you need more clarity around it, in many cases, the requirement is to get help. That requires vulnerability. It requires a bit of humility. You may even have to invest into that thing or that person, right? That's that is humbling yourself with dollars and cents, right? I mean, it is. And Melissa and I joke about this all the time. There's like the tuition of entrepreneurship. It's the most expensive tuition out there, man. Like it makes Harvard look cheap. And I've written those checks too many times. Right. But I think in many ways for us to be great business leaders, and regardless of industry, but to surround yourself with the people that have the perspective, the leadership, and provide you the accountability you need to get through that, it requires humility.
Yeah, that's huge. Oh boy. Okay, so I got another line of questions.
I got something after that.
You do? Okay. All right. This is what happens. Sometimes we get all geeked out on something, then we fight for mic time. All right. So I want to wrestle a little bit with this kind of controller versus CFO role. Okay. And maybe just because those are very specific terms that the kind of broader generic business world uses, sometimes we've got everything in our industry from office managers to like, lead coordinators. And somehow we kind of are trying to find this way of accomplishing or establishing oversight over our financials.
Yep.
So like kind of a two-part question. So one, help us identify kind of the core differences between those two roles. And then maybe company size, like at what point do companies start considering those functions or roles within the organization? And then the last thing, and I think you can weave this in, is I can't tell you how often we will hear remarks around people's lack of wanting to hire non-revenue generating roles. And somehow when it comes to AR and finances, this tends to be the place that we skimp first. And I'd just love to hear your perspective on how what you think about that.
That's a loaded question. There was like 8 questions there.
I know.
And that's why I was going to go, Jim, you can go first on that one.
Well, let's break this up. I think the first question I heard was difference between a controller and a CFO.
Yeah. Yep.
Melissa, I think you should tackle this, like, and be very like, this is what each one is.
A CFO is a strategic financial leader. Simple, right? And it's not simple, but it is. So, can a CFO do bookkeeping? Sure. Does a CFO know how to write a check? Yes. Can a CFO put together some AR schedules and prepaid schedules and all those fun details? Absolutely. And they better be able to, because they're going to use all those schedules, then the WIP schedule and 1,000 things in between to make a strategic financial projection. They should be weaving in owner goals, business goals. They should be looking around what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the economy. I don't know. You might have some loan payments that are coming up in 5 years. They should be thinking about that today, right? So they are that person who is always looking into the future. That's their job. You need a good controller, you need a good bookkeeper or an office manager or whomever you would like to call them, because as you said, I've heard them called all different names, right? Yeah. But a controller is that person who is able to complete those higher level schedules and have their hands in a few more things all at one time, right? It's very simple to hire someone who is just good at calling for collections, right? But your controller needs to have their hands in understanding how much payable outstanding you have, AR outstanding. They need to know the demand of cash flow, but they're looking in a more short-sighted way, and that's not a bad thing, right? I don't want to say because they're not looking 5 years in advance they're not doing their job. They are doing their job. They are keeping everything inside of one playing field at a time, and they're juggling all of that. And what they should be doing is they should say, that insurance bill is going to be coming due next week, CFO, and I'm looking at the bank account and it looks a little light. Did you have you thought about that, right? And so be a good partner for sure. So strategic and high level hands-on day-to-day activity would probably be the easiest way, I think, of separating those two jobs.
Okay, so somebody like, if I'm almost hearing you say the controller's more, they might be 3 months out, they might be looking a couple quarters ahead, but they are more
Yeah,
kind of like what's in front of us right now. Whereas our CFO is way more strategic, forward thinking, several years out.
and the controller's more tactical, right?
Okay,
They're
yeah.
definitely more of a tactical mindset and a tactical workload.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What about
And
size of company? Where do you see those roles begin to get onboarded most consistently?
I have to say, size is not always the first thing that I look at when it comes to that. It comes to how do you operate, right? Because we have companies who we work with that are really complex. So having a bookkeeper controller, even at $3 million, sometimes is a little necessary, right? Having somebody into that day to day. But then we have other companies that are larger, right? That are at $10 million, and they're okay with someone who is cutting payable checks, like a more of a midline bookkeeper and a CFO, right? Because they need that strategic forethought. So it is not, there's not a hard and fast rule. I would start with how efficient is your process and how clean is your data and things that you're working on. But what I have seen, if you're looking for a rule of thumb out there, controllers probably somewhere around 10 million and above. But again, no hard and fast rule that makes it perfect.
Okay. Yeah, Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Just more on the definitions. Yeah, on the definition side, I'll make it just. I'm such a simple person. The CFO is not part of the accounting department, and the controller is. The CFO is part of your leadership team, right? Helping you grow, helping you make strategic decisions, helping leverage decades of experience growing companies. Whereas the controller, and to Melissa's point earlier, this is not a bad thing. The controller, bookkeeper, accounting manager, whatever you want to call that person, is responsible for day-to-day accounting activities. And I think it's really that simple, in the sense that you need, in my opinion, to scale to multiple 8 figures and beyond, you need both. And again, you might need a controller, a bookkeeper, and an AR person or a payroll processor. Like it, I don't want to totally define and put hard boundaries on these things.
Sure.
But I think that is required or will be required. And then you will also need somebody who can help you think strategically about acquisitions, raising capital, pricing adjustments, financial forecasting, projections, all those things that at a $10 million company, number one, the controller won't have time, because there's going to be a significant demand on them to manage the day-to-day things, and they should. And then number two, they likely won't have the capability and or experience to rightfully help you grow and scale your business the way you probably want to as the business owner. So I think both are needed. It's not a bad thing that they're differentiated in summary. And I would say from a revenue size perspective, Melissa already said it, I think, that bookkeeping function, I mean, you kind of need it day one, right, to a degree, to cut checks and pay bills and process payroll. But I would say that fractional CFO, and I can even step that to a degree, right? If you're a $100 million company, you better have a full-time CFO sit in the seat, period,
Yeah.
But if you're a $20 million company, you probably don't need that full-time. So you might be able to get away with a fractional CFO.
That's helpful. I think that helped clear it up for a lot of people. It's funny how often I get that question between the two. And it's been, it was kind of a moving target for me too. So,
Yeah.
Okay. What about this whole, when we hear things like, well, I don't really like hiring non-revenue producing employees in regard to administrative or financial support. What's your guys' perspective on that?
Who said that?
Everyone.
I guess I'll take this one. For me, I like, and I've been asking this question more and more to business owners, current clients, but also folks that I'm talking to about working with Backbone CFO specifically. And that is, how much money are you leaving on the table right now? Like, you think you're profitable, you think you're growing. Brandon, I think you said it earlier, you know, you're focused on the top line, and maybe that's even growing right now. But there's still a problem, and that is, you know, you're not profitable. You're not as profitable as you could be, and you definitely know there's not as much cash in the bank as there should be. And I would ask you, like, as the business owner, thinking that thought, and it's a fair thought. Trust me, I run a business, and I think the exact same thing. So the question I have to answer is, well, what am I leaving on the table if I'm running at a 5% net or a 5% EBITDA, and I know industry standard or best practice is 10 to 15%, and I'm running a $10 million company? Well, quick math tells me that I'm leaving $1 million on the table every year that I'm not at best practice or standard in my industry, right? That's rough math.
Yeah.
So who in my company, who on my leadership team is helping me close the gap on that $1 million? It's definitely not your salesperson. It's 100% not your operations person, right? Because they're focused on that above the cogs, like they're focused on job level profitability and execution, and they should be. So who is it? Who's helping you make sure there's more cash and more profit in the business? My guess is most business owners get to, you know, especially listening to this podcast, gotten to the point where you've probably outgrown your own capability in this realm, and that's totally okay. So then it becomes a who, not how question, which means you have to look at somebody to fill that gap and to fill that void. And that would be my answer, to say, if you're okay with leaving, you know, $1 million on the table every year, then keep going, man.
Yeah. Don't hire them.
Don't hire.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome way to put it. I think, again, there's probably a theme about opportunity costs and being able to pencil that out. And
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect example of a lot of times you can actually identify a physical number to it, and paying somebody 80, 90 grand to come in and manage AR like a pit bull might be worth $1 million. So
that's true though. And I will say, like, hard numbers, evidence, right? I think is important. So we just did this internally, and I would, this is not even a plug for our company, Backbone CFO, but I think it's also just industry standard. So if you're thinking about can I hire a CFO or a fractional CFO to some degree, we did this with our 30-some clients, Melissa, maybe 2 months ago. What is our average client revenue and what's our average client profitability? But here's the better question. How has that changed in the last year? Right? Because nobody cares. Like, if I tell you our average client is $50 million a year and they're at 10% EBITDA, well, that doesn't mean anything. Because what did you do to contribute to that?
Yeah.
And what the numbers I'm about to share with you aren't necessarily saying, well, we have done all this work, as much as it is, we operate within companies that grow like this, which is our average client does 10 million a year in sales, or did 10 million, and are on pace to do 12. So that's a 20% top line profit. Yep. I'm sorry, top line growth.
Yep.
And then our average client on that $10 million did 10% net profit last year. So figure $1 million bucks. Yeah. And then is growing up to, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, 20% as well. 20% net profit.
Yeah.
So that's $2 million. So again, on average, now we have people on both sides of those numbers.
Sure.
I don't know what's an extra $1 million bucks worth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's beautiful. I think that's a great example. It's awesome. Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up, is it possible we can give people a little candy, a little fodder of like some ideas that they can, you know, take with them or reach out to you for help with? But last night I was sitting in the sauna with a buddy of mine who owns a $10 million roofing company.
Yep.
And he was talking to me about a thing he's looking into. One of his biggest overhead cost items with a roofing company is insurance.
Ooh. I was literally gonna comment on this today.
So he spends, just rough math, roughly $500,000 a year on all the various insurance coverages, everything from GL to workers' comp to all of that stuff, health insurance even. And he started poking around in there and discovered there's a strategy of self-insuring that once somebody gets up into about those numbers, about $10 million top line, 500 plus thousand in total premium expenditure, self-insurance using a third-party administrator can be an incredibly powerful wealth building strategy for recapturing a lot of that expense and then being able to utilize it down the line in a tax-free basis. Is this a strategy that you guys are familiar with and you've helped service companies deploy when they get to a certain size?
I would say there's two different solutions that I've seen used very, very well. One is I'll just kind of piggyback on the first one you mentioned, which is a self-insurance, and there's even on the group health insurance side, there's partially self-insured. Yeah. So you can kind of even hedge further down than being fully self-insured. So that's 100% a way to create significant margin in your business, put it back into your operations, reinvest it for growth, whatever. Mm-hmm. The second thing I'll say is, especially at a business that size, with those levels of premium, especially if we're talking, and this is getting a little bit more in the insurance world, but if we're talking general liability specifically, right? Not necessarily. I'm sorry. If we're talking workers' comp, there is also group captives, which can also significantly reduce the overall exposure, right, to premium outlays. It's a bit different than self-insurance because there's going to be it's going to take some time to recoup that exposure, but it could also be a much better tax play for the business owner themselves. Again, there are two. If we're talking $10 million plus revenue size, those are two options for the business owner to be looking at from a cost savings perspective. Yeah. Again, that's self-insurance or partially self-insured, and then the other one is group captives, especially when your total spend on insurance is that high. That play though is, I would say, longer term, has a bigger upside, and has a potentially a high degree of potential tax savings for you as the business owner.
Cool.
Melissa, I don't know if you added that on.
It was profound. Like the money that he was talking about in terms of savings in a good year, you're just raking additional profit into the coffers, and in a bad year, you're still generally better off than you would have been paying straight premiums. And he was talking about the example he was looking at is company would be responsible for the first $250,000 in expenses, and then they have reinsurance in place at a relatively low cost to cover all of the catastrophic kind of losses that they might experience. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw this concept out there, and certainly people could reach out to you if they want some guidance on exploring that. Presumably,
for sure. And group captive is, I'll give that as an endorsement with what Jim was talking about. That's where my eyes lit up immediately when you were talking about that. So self-insurance is good, but group captive has a really good payback to the owner as well, too.
That's super interesting.
One other thing that for smaller companies, under $10 million, that this is more on the health insurance side, which can still be, I mean, that can really add up if you're funding 10, 15, 20 employees, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So you may not qualify, or you may just not have a threshold of spend that it makes sense to go down the self-insurance route. I have seen, and our own company takes advantage of this, what is called a ICHRA, which is an individual coverage health insurance reimbursement account. Woo! ICHRA. And what the advantage of that program has nothing to do with taxes or anything like that. But what it does allow you to do is level set your exposure. And we all know this inherently. Unfortunately, this is true. Health insurance premiums go up like insane amounts every year. And here's the thing though. You just can't control it. Yeah. Like, it is what it is, especially under 50 lives. Like, you're just kind of at the mercy of whatever the market does. Oh, yeah. But with an ICHRA, what this allows you to do is allows your employees to go onto either the federal or the state marketplace for health insurance, let them buy whatever insurance they want or need for their families, and then the business can set the reimbursable premium amount at anything that they can afford. So this kind of, although health insurance itself, you can't control the cost of that, you can, in this case, control the exposure you have to premium outlays. So it's another way, I would say, maybe more inclined to smaller businesses that don't have the benefit or the luxury of those self-insurance plans or group captives because you just don't have enough spend.
Yeah.
Maybe another thing you can look at is this ICHRA as a way to keep costs down and affordable for your business as you scale.
I just want to add something to that really quick, Melissa. Sorry, is the impact on the value perception of the employee. Like, I'm so excited that you brought that up. So Wayne and I have been talking about this internally. Like, we've got to find a better way because our team is so small that when what we think is this rad benefit that we'll pay 100% of the employee, blah, blah, blah. The challenge is that technically there's times where some of our people could go get better coverage from the marketplace themselves. Yeah. And so I've almost stuck them in a scenario where the insurance I'm providing them is less than optimal. And now this thing I gave them thinking it was so rad is actually kind of perceived as a okay at best versus something rad. And so we are actively looking at something like this as a change. So this is great.
Yeah.
What else did you have?
I'll give one more shout out to why Anikra is positive. If you have employees across states, right? Now they get to pick a plan that is good for their state. Because let's be honest, Aetna's good in this state, United Healthcare's good in this state, Kaiser's good in this state. Now you've allowed that employee to pick what is best for them in their location, and the company is only reimbursing to what they can afford, not trying to find this multi-state plan that satisfies all of the employees. So I will say everything plus one, everything y'all have said, but I really want to echo that point, especially when people are in different states.
That's awesome. That's a great one. Guys, another one or two items like that, just kind of some low-hanging fruit that you see a lot of teams just not realize is right at their fingertips that could have a positive impact on cash flow and profit right now.
So, Melissa, just since we're on this topic of insurance, it reminds me of the one client like 2 years ago that was wrapped up in a PEO because they were doing what they thought was right by their employees because they had employees in multiple states. So they got in this PEO, and the PEO was the administrative fees, and this was a $3 million company. It's not a big company. The administrative fees for this client in the PEO was over $50,000 a year for a few employees for a $3 million company. I mean, it was almost robbery. Like, I couldn't believe my eyes. And one of the first things we did was we broke the PEO up, got all their insurances separately, which was a little bit of work, right? But for somebody who knows what they're doing and has connections, it's not. And then we put them in an ICRA, and we completely eliminated that PEO fee. We saved them $50,000 a year, which, by the way, more than covered at the time the cost of even hiring us. Yeah. So that one change allowed them to get all the insurances they needed. And not have this ridiculous administrative fee, and then they're wrapped up in this contract, and all it was so complicated, and it was like an antithesis of business, right? It was just now break this thing up, get these fees down, and make this affordable. So that might be another one if somebody out there is wrapped. And I'm not saying PEOs are always bad; it's not the message, but evaluate it, and if the fees outweigh the benefits, it might be something you can save money on.
Yeah, like it. Yeah, Melissa, anything?
So if I were to give entrepreneurs out there who are looking to think out 3-5 years, and they maybe want to sell their business. So I think that we have had an experience where people have come to us and said, oh, I have a letter of intent. Just to throw it out there, that's not the best time to then bring us bring a CFO and a strategic financial leader on board. You want to do that 3 to 5 years before you start having that conversation, because what I can give you as one specific example, we worked with a company they had an offer. We decided to take a break for a minute, regroup in a lot of ways, and we went back and had a whole nother conversation because we were able to get clarity on their financials, clarity on their operations, and we understood what was in front of us, that we were able to almost 2x that number completely. Wow. It was 180 times. So my point is, do what you do best as an entrepreneur. Be out there, be great at getting business, be great at doing restoration, be great at doing roofing and all of the other trades and things that you do, because I'm going to tell you, I can't. But let a CFO, a strategic financial partner, do what they do best and come in and really help you get all the money that you're leaving on the table. So going back to Jim's point of being able to, we've been able to work with our clients and turn them up by 10% in net profit in 1 year, and that's not going to be repeatable every single time, right? Yeah. But let us come in, let a CFO come in and help you look at that and give you a different strategic perspective, because you don't always see what you can't see, right? And so it's nice to have that sounding board.
I think that's great. You can't always see what you don't see. I think that's great.
I think you just landed the plane for us too, Melissa. It was a perfect wrap up. Yes.
Right.
This has been great, guys. Like I said, I was excited coming into this. I feel like there's a lot of gold nuggets that people can harvest out of this conversation. And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you? How do they find you and find more information?
So backbonecfo.com is our website. Great spot to start. There's a form on there on our work with us page if they want to submit that, and or just email us, jim.emerich@backbonecfo, melissa.zinni@backbonecfo.com. We can both be reached. We'd love to chat with anybody and see if we can help them.
Love it.
Awesome. Love it, guys. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you taking the time to hang with us.
All right,
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.